NOS4A2.
What is going on, everyone, and welcome to the Men vs. Movies NOS4A2 After Show. This is the show where we're going to be discussing the latest episodes in the latest AMC series, NOS4A2, and it's based off of the Joe Hill novel of the same name. Now, I don't want to do this alone. I want to have a lively discussion, and so I brought on my good friend Mike from Real School, who is actually familiar with the original source material, one of the big reasons I have him on here, aside from being a great guy. Anyway, so he's going to be helping me dive into the details of this show. So, Mike, let everyone know how you're doing.
Hey, guys, what's going on? Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about NOS4A2 because it's got a really good cast, some well-known character actors, and then the rest of the cast. But I'm telling you right now, there are a lot of surprises when it comes to the show. So looking forward to talking to it.
Yeah, well, and actually it's really interesting because we both went to South by Southwest, and I believe this is where you originally saw it. So I guess this could be considered part of Men vs. Movies' late South by Southwest coverage. But anyways, you saw what, like the first 4 episodes, is it?
Yeah, I was lucky enough to get a screener so that I missed out on. I could have seen the first 6, and I'm kind of kicking myself that I didn't do that. But watched the first 4, and I'm hooked. You and I kind of chatted about this like right after it was done about like it's a really intriguing show, so it will hook you in a lot of ways. But there's some aspects about the show that you're not too sure about, especially in the first 2 episodes. But we're just going to talk about the first one tonight. But yeah. So it is definitely an intriguing show, and definitely a show that's going to be peeled away kind of layer by layer, a lot like the book. You know, I think that's how the Kings, even though it's Joe Hill, that's how the Kings tend to write. They really develop things slowly sometimes, and I think this show is going to kind of mirror that a little bit.
That's kind of the vibe I was getting from it, just kind of overall. It just a very slow burn, very establishing. That's what this episode is for the most part, and you're right. I mean, it sunk its hooks into me, and I definitely want to see what comes next. But before we move forward, as always, guys, if you like movie-related content or television-related content, be sure to hit that subscribe button where we take on the best and worst of cinema and sometimes television on a weekly basis. And then also be sure to go head on over to Mike's channel, give him a sub, or follow him on Twitter. We'll get to that stuff later on, but regardless, let's get into NOS4A2. Now, this is an interesting series because it's actually, the whole season is actually available to watch on AMC Premiere. And while we could certainly just, binge the whole season and, talk about it all at once, they are releasing it weekly for the people who do not subscribe to that particular service. So we are going to release these episodes every Sunday following the episodes. Now, they may be pre-recorded, but they are still going to be discussions based off of the episode that we just watched. So without further ado, let's get into the season premiere of NOS4A2. Now, Mike, I'm going to throw it to you and just to kind of give a little overview of the concept of the show itself, and then also what the main focus of this episode was.
Okay, well, for those of you who aren't familiar with NOS4A2 being a vampiric reference, it's actually, it's a play on the whole vampire thing, but it is the license plate of this car that is driven by the main antagonist. Now, I keep kind of poking fun at Joe Hill, but, the source material is really an amalgam of, I like to think of as Dad's greatest hits. So Stephen King's greatest hits, we're talking like Christine, The Stand a little bit, The Shining. There are elements from each one of those books and each one of those movies that you get in this show. And so basically it opens with a young boy, Danny, who is kind of being mistreated or ignored by his mother. His mom has somebody over. She's being amorous and loud, and she doesn't seem like the greatest mother in the world. But Danny kind of comes in one night and he says, "Mom, can I sleep with you?" Well, there's already somebody in her bed, and basically Danny feels ignored. And when Danny feels ignored, that triggers some noises outside. He follows the noises. He sees this mysterious car. It's a very old-fashioned sort of BMW.
Rolls Royce. It's a
Rolls Royce. There you go.
Rolls Royce. Wait, I think, or
the Wraith. That's right.
Wraith. Sorry. Yes. Yeah.
That's right. So it's a really old-fashioned car. The door kind of opens magically on its own. There are tons of Christmas presents. It looks warm. It's inviting. Christmas carols are playing. sure enough, we know that this is a trap. And then unfortunately, his mother, Danny's mother, meets quite a grisly demise, and he is trapped in the car. And the driver of the car is our main antagonist, and that is Charlie Manx, who looks like a ghoul, but he kind of has that interesting, I don't know, grandfatherly charm. There's something about him that is kind of inviting and creepy at the same time, right? Where he doesn't look like he's outright trying to harm Danny, but at the same time, he is trapping small children in the car. And let's
put it this way: I sure as shit wouldn't trust that guy. No. Real quickly before we move on, I do want to talk about the prosthetics on Zachary Quinto, who is playing Charlie Manx. Mm-hmm. I found them to be great, actually, and especially as the episode progressed and he got younger, which we'll get into a little bit later on. I really appreciated the amount of detail that went into making him look authentic in each stage of his, I guess, de-aging, you could say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of felt that. I think you're absolutely right, especially because this is the first time we see Manx, right, and he has to look like that ghoul. He has to look really old because he is obviously like an ageless vampire. Well, maybe not ageless, but a mortal vampire. Right. And so we see that. And I think my only critique has to do with Quinto's performance. And the funny thing is, I'm a huge fan of Quinto, but I found the old Charlie Manx was a little too, what would you get a high school like drama kid to try? If you have to be an old man, be an old man. And because Quinto has proven time and time again in movies, and he's done a lot of television, how good he is at building a character. And being the first time that we see Charlie, I couldn't get over his, well, hello, I'm here. He does that. And I know he's getting into the character. And I know that's hard to do, too, because as you had mentioned, the character has different iterations. And we see that in the first episode and more. So I know he was really trying to separate himself from younger Manx, right? So here we have the old grisly ghoul, but to me it was just like, is that the voice he's going to go with? And it is. Yeah. So there's part of it that's distracting,
right? No, and I actually do agree, because that segment in particular, it gave me flashes of something, and I couldn't, for the life of me, put a finger on what exactly it was, but I had flashes of some other like campy, ghoulish kind of it was either a show or a movie or something. It just gave me as opposed to a lot of the rest of the stuff that happened in this episode. That stuff felt very television, and dated television at that, like kind of 90s TV. I guess we'll go in that route. I got they were kind of like setting up the whole thing, but I thought they could have gone scarier with it. Because this is basically his version of Georgie's abduction in It. And you compare the two, and granted, the antagonists are very different, but I feel like they could have they could have done something to really just liven it up, spicing it up to make it more to play in more into that horror angle, because the rest of the episode, there's really not an opportunity for that per se. So this would have been the perfect opportunity to just sink their teeth in right off the bat, no pun intended, and really grip people in that first, really important segment of the episode.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, and I think they played it somewhat safe in a lot of ways. Yeah. And I think, part of that was Quinto's performance. He was just doing kind of a stereotype we've, seen or heard before. There could have been more impact because, since this is a wrap-up show, it's not spoilers, but even when the mom is killed, it's not overly dramatic or overly gory.
It's really anticlimactic. It's just like his henchman comes in with a syringe and boop, see ya.
Yeah, and she doesn't even get with the syringe. She breaks her neck. But even that...
she doesn't get the syringe.
Yeah. Which was his thing, right? I mean, that sets up the plot later on. But it was just kind of like, well, okay. Yeah. And for him to be the big bad, we haven't seen that yet. And of course, I got to do this because this is how I heard of Quinto in the first place. You think about how Siler in Heroes,
yes. Yeah.
how he was developed and how we saw the horror that this guy created even before we saw him on screen. That to me could have really built it up a lot more. Or even if we didn't see him for a while, I felt like they could have played that card. Like maybe we don't see Manx for at least half an hour, right?
Yeah.
Because having him in the first probably 10 minutes of this episode, you kind of go, oh, okay, there he is. And it's literally that reaction because you go, oh, okay, I guess that's the guy.
Yeah.
And then, you're with him for the rest of the hour pretty much.
Yeah. Well, and I almost agree with you there. They could have like shown like the side of him, like his hat or something like that, make it very mysterious and ominous, but they didn't. They kind of just were just like, there he is. And as a result, we as the audience are just kind of like, yeah, there he is.
Okay.
There's your big bad. Luckily, as the show progressed, I enjoyed Quinto's performance more because he was able to just kind of, act instead of put on an act, you could say.
Well said. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I would totally agree. I think when he plays the next iteration we see of Manx where he's younger, there are some real delicious moments where you see him really start to get into the character more, because you're right, he's not focused on the prosthetics or the pose of trying to look like an old man. This is a character he's kind of played before. I won't say it's exactly like anything we've seen Quinto play, but we know that he can play ghoulish on the inside, I think is the best way of putting it. And there were some definite moments where he's talking and you just go, oof, like, I don't care what it looks like. That's dark.
Yeah. And I don't want to keep jumping too far ahead, but the second time we see him, and he is a little bit younger, and he does that thing with his teeth. He's like, I'm like, oh God, he's got it. Right. I mean, it helped that the teeth prosthetics were very convincing and stuff, but he really sold you on being that creepy, child abductor vampire,
predator, right?
Perfect way to say it, predator. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
And so it was like from then on out, I was like, okay, I'm really digging Quinto's performance, but as a whole, the Manx stuff I didn't think was even needed in this episode, because and as we're going to get to now, the most interesting part of this episode was everything with Ashley Cummings and playing Vic McQueen.
Right. And you're right, because Vic McQueen and her family, specifically her relationship with her dad, that is the most interesting thing. And again, it really is. I give credit to Hill, and this isn't to take away from his writing and say it's like a lot like his dad, but he did learn from a master.
He really, right.
And his dad was always good at building relationships, whether or not we completely believe them, I don't know, but they were always there in all of his stories. And you think about, would The Shining be completely different if you didn't have it as a family, right? Or didn't have Danny as one of the victims, the young boy, right? You think about The Stand, you think about Stand By Me, where we've got these huge bonds and it just kind of ups the drama. And to me, the saving grace of episode 1 is what Vic is going through. Her relationship with her mom, her relationship with her dad, the parents in general, the parents fight, and then how she's trying to escape because, she's in a lot of ways not the kind of rebellious teen we've seen where she's causing crap for her parents. It would have been so easy to write her off as like, I like motorcycles and like, I don't want to go to school and, like all this kind of stuff. She's not that kid. She loves both of her parents and you see that. She wants to be herself, but she's afraid to say something. So again, she doesn't have that attitude. She doesn't necessarily like the way that some people treat her or talk to her. So she's strong, but at the same time, she takes a lot in. So I think what's great about her character, and I think you'll agree with Ashley Cummings, fairly new actress, she does phenomenally with this role. And
she really does. Yeah. Right
off
the bat too. It doesn't even take like 2 episodes or so for her to get into the character. She really just comes out swinging. And I was impressed. I was very impressed. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. And I think that's important because I think we are going to see that Manx isn't going to drive the story, that she obviously has to, that Vic has to. And for you to get the right actress is important. and to get the right kind of momentum right off the bat in the first episode. That's important. And obviously to give you a character that you can gravitate towards and latch onto, that's huge. So yeah, kudos to her for that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. What did you think of the Boston accents? Because they definitely tried their hand at doing some accents to add to the authenticity. Sometimes I noticed it, sometimes I didn't notice it. So I guess that's an overall good sign.
Well, I'll say this, why sometimes you noticed it and sometimes you didn't? Because sometimes they weren't doing them.
Yeah,
so,
I was thinking that.
There's a little inconsistency. I think the dad character, and a lot of people will recognize that actor from season 1 of Punisher.
Yeah.
And he's a great actor. I'm sorry. He's got a kind of bizarre name.
It's either Eben or Eben Moss Backrich or Backrack or something. Butchering that name, but regardless.
So Eben, he's a solid actor, and he really grounds that role, and he does a pretty subtle Boston accent, which you can hear sometimes, right? Yeah. But I know the mom character, for instance,
she would slip in and out.
Yeah, and there's that one scene where they're in the diner. I guess that's probably just before like the 4th of July. And she comes in and she's like, okay, burgers for everybody.
Yeah, you
can
like, really tell her trying
like
hard
she just
for that one.
Cranked it to 11, right? Yeah, and that was the one. I think that's the first moment in the episode where I go, right, they're supposed to be in Massachusetts.
Same with, no, I would say the moment where I noticed was the first introduction to the dad, because you're right. He was doing a pretty authentic one. He wasn't like going overboard, departed with it, and he wasn't doing, he wasn't inconsistent. He was in the pocket. So that was the moment where I was like, oh yeah, right, we're in Massachusetts, because of course it can't be Maine, because then he would be encroaching on his father's territory.
That's it. Yeah. You stay close geographically, but not exactly the same place. Yeah.
So yeah, I guess moving forward with the plot, after we get our introduction to Vic, you want to talk about the bridge stuff?
Yeah, this is where it really starts to get interesting, I think, because she notices this old covered bridge, as you tend to do, I guess, in rural, America and places. Doesn't say much. She's an artist, so she's sketching everything. We see her in one of her art classes later on, and she's not sketching what she's supposed to be sketching. But of course, nobody has an issue with that. And the art teacher comes along and she goes, "Oh, it's beautiful line work," which it was very nice artwork.
Oh, yeah. And well done, props department.
Exactly, whoever drew that.
Yeah.
And so the art teacher even says, "Oh, that reminds me of that old one." Pretty much where Vic was, obviously. And she said, "Oh, it's too bad, that's been torn down." And so Vic's kind of like, "Well, what are you talking about? It's been torn down. Like, I just saw it." She keeps it to herself, but she's like, "Oh, okay, that's weird." She asks her dad about it like the next day, and her dad says, "Oh yeah, we used to get in trouble, in those kind of bridges, or that bridge specifically, all the time." But yeah, sure enough, it has been torn down. And yet when Vic goes back, she can travel through this bridge. Only she can travel through this bridge, but basically she's one of the only people who can see it. She can use it as a portal. I can't remember what's the term that they use in the show. It's something like shortcut, or
there's something like that. I don't even remember the term myself, and I just watched this, so maybe that's bad.
Right. And it's like these little pockets of interdimensional travel that only people can access. And a really cool touch that something is written on the side of the bridge when she rides in. So it looks like somebody, spray painted graffiti, and it'll say like "The Watch," or it'll say something like that, because we're going to learn more about this, but it's from the book, that she can find lost items, that this is in a sense her power, and she can use these shortcuts, or whatever you want to call it, to go wherever she wants to find these items. She just kind of has to picture either the item or the place in her head, and then she can go there. And this also attracts Manx, which we see at one point, because he kind of picks up on the psychic vibes. He tries to tune his radio, because as we know, everything in this universe is magic. So he tunes the radio in the magic car, and he's trying to determine who this girl is and what's going on. So we see that there is going to be this kind of inevitable clash between these two, because they're on the same wavelength, or at least he knows something about this world that she doesn't know anything about. So
Right, yeah, and that stuff was I found to be rather interesting. You know, her kind of discovering her powers. From what I've read or what I've listened to of the book, that with her going through the tunnel to get the watch and stuff like that felt like, especially the stuff with her eye, really felt like accurate to what was going on in the book, which I appreciated. And yeah, obviously we know that her and Manx are going to come to a head at some point during the season, but she's not the only person with abilities. There's also, and I don't know the character's name, but she was the sister to Danny, I believe, right? Isn't she?
I don't know if she's the sister or
she's like some sort of like neighbor or friend or something.
Right. She had tutored him in math, I think, or something like that. So she was a family friend. Yeah, I can't remember the code. See, that's not a good sign when you can't remember the character's name. But
that whole story arc was completely unnecessary this episode as well, I would say. I mean, like, I got the point of it because it was like it was basically laying out to the audience, oh, these two people, the brat and the wraith, are gonna clash. Like, there's your protagonist and your antagonist. So like that was really the only point of that, other than showing that, oh, other people in this world have abilities. This girl out here in Iowa is kind of like clairvoyant or something like that, and then like
that's right.
Vic has this ability to go through a bridge, and so it's really interesting because they don't, in this episode, they don't really touch on it too much. They're pretty vague with it, which I think creates that intrigue as a result. They don't really give too much away. They're kind of like, okay, so some people have abilities in this. How? What's the, like, how does that happen? What are the rules of this world? And whereas with most series, they want to establish the rules of the world right off the bat, I kind of like that they didn't. They're kind of just like, this is how it is. We'll kind of ease you into it, which it's cool. It's kind of refreshing, I would say.
Yeah, and I will say the unfortunate thing is that may only be there for the first couple of episodes, and then we will get one that is very heavy on exposition. But having said that, I totally agree with you that, you know, it's a good slow burn. I actually thought it could even be slower because,
really,
with her character and with that storyline, I think you're absolutely right. I think if they chipped away about half of it, like they didn't need it, just introduce her, maybe just introduce her relationship, to the kid who's taken at the beginning, so that we understand the link. And then you didn't even have to play it off like right away we see her with powers. You know, it could have been something at the end of the episode, a little cliffhanger. That's just organization in terms of the story, right? But I think you're right. I think, you know, it's a slow burn that we don't get enough of. We know exactly who she is. We know exactly what she can do. But it should be explained. The references that you made to the Brat and the Wraith comes from this character, because basically she can reach into what's like her Mary Poppins little set, right? She reaches in. Yeah. Her arm disappears because it's so deep. Again, she's kind of accessing this interdimensional thing. She pulls out Scrabble tiles and she can spell a word. She'll ask them, you know, a question before she does that, and then it'll spell out the answer. And as you had mentioned, the Brat is obviously Vic, which I didn't really understand, because I was like, she's not really a brat. I kind of understand.
They do, right. They call her the Brat in the book. Actually, they call her the Brat before we even know her name is Vic in the book.
Right.
So like right. But at the same time, you're right. She's not really a brat, but I guess
she's a nice enough kid. Yeah.
Right. That's what her dad calls her, though.
That's it. That's very true. Yeah. And then the Wraith, as we kind of mention, is actually a reference to the car. But of course, the Wraith kind of is a reference to Manx at the same time, right? Because he is that kind of twisted bringer of death, and right. So we know that the two of them, once again, because of this girl who can kind of summon the pieces, whatever it's called.
She's the ultimate Scrabble player.
Exactly. Yeah, she must. God, I would never want to play her because she can cheat all the time. But but she's the one who kind of brings the story together. But you're right, and you know, the other thing that I kind of found funny and maybe a little stretch was her relationship with the sheriff.
That was very odd. It felt really like Riverdale, like campy. You know, that whole segment was just like really. totally off from everything we were getting with Vic and her family.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was closer in tone to the stuff with Manx, which is which I get, because that's like the closest relation at the moment. Really, it's just Vic out here in Massachusetts doing her own thing, and then these two storylines are more connected than her. So I can understand why they are closer in tone, but at the same time, some of it really felt like teen drama kind of thing with that, and I was just like, oh, all right, this is kind of creepy, but
and she's got that kind of like teen investigator go-getter attitude, right? She's like, I'm just gonna investigate like what's going on. I'm gonna sneak through the police tape and talk to the sheriff directly. And you're kind of like, what? This is like a major crime. Like 2 people are dead and a kid is missing, and she's just like, I tutored the kid. Come on, man, we're friends. And I was like,
he just gets
sheriff, do your exactly. He's just like, okay, yeah, of course, I'll entertain this. And I'm like,
right. But the thing I will say, though, is they kind of allude to, like, she has a history of helping out the police with unsolved murders and stuff like that. Because they do reference, like, she was like, I was right about that one case. And he's like, all right, it was that one case. And then she's like, let me try this one. He's like, and so, it's like they kind of loosely established like a previous working relationship. So that didn't bother me. It was just kind of like the tone for that. It was just, I don't know. I understood why it was in the episode, but at the same time, it was like every time they cut back to that, I was just kind of like, all right, this is not as interesting as the stuff we have going on with Vic.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah, but going back to Vic and her family, I really want to touch on the family dynamic, because we touched on it a little bit, but I think there's some really powerful scenes there, and I think what Ashley Cummings does so well is you can just, like, she'll just be sitting there working while the yelling's going on in the background. You can just see the internal frustration, anger, and just sadness. She doesn't really have to emote too much, like like physically. You can just really see it in her eyes and just her subtle movements, and that's what really impressed me about her performance. And then seeing showing that, like, highlighting her relationships with her mother and father separately, because we see her with her dad and we're like, oh, okay, maybe he's not that bad of a guy, yada yada yada. He's like, we see how they bond together. They have a really close relationship, and so we understand why she gravitates more towards him. Whereas like the mom, she's like, no, you're not going to college, you're going to work, and you're going to be my assistant in this cleaning business, and Vic's just like, well, that's a waste of my abilities. And so there was a lot of like relatability to this character and the dynamics between her parents, but ultimately by the end of the episode, I felt bad for her mom in a way, and like she was really off-putting at first, but like it's just, and the dad kind of explained it, that was just the life that she knew. She grew up in this town. She's very much a small town person. I mean, her dad's an alcoholic. He wants to get with younger women and whatnot. And so it's like, I understood the 3 McQueens very well by the end of this episode, which is not something you can say for a lot of season premieres. Like, I understand who these people are, and I think that was very well executed in this episode.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think you touched on it perfectly, where it's really important that we feel that Vic is lost in a lot of ways, right? And that's kind of a
crossroads, and it's very poetic that her way out is this bridge.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's it. There's a motif. There are themes all about being lost, finding your way. And we kind of have to realize that Manx is a collector of lost things, so to speak, that she is a finder of lost things. And it's because she starts off like that, before we even see her powers start to manifest. So you're absolutely right. I mean, she plays that off beautifully, and you can see that many different times. It isn't just with the family, but beginning of the episode where she's trying to figure out, should I clean like my mom? Should I be grounded? Should I be an artist? The other thing about when she meets with her friends at that party, well-to-do party. So those typical kind of upper class snooty kids making fun of people who clean houses and, all this kind of stuff. And she's like, oh, I had enough of this. So she is lost in a lot of ways what I like about that episode, which you kind of touched on, is that everything we feel for the dad switches at one moment. Everything we feel for the mother switches at another moment. So you're absolutely right, where we don't even know. We know a lot about them, but we don't know how to feel about everybody. And so in a sense, we really go through what Vic goes through because we're lost as well. We're not like the dad's the good guy and the mom is the evil, like stuck in her ways kind of mom. We see what the motivation is. So yeah, kudos to all three of the actors, like you said, in the McMahon family, or McQueen yes. family. Yes.
Yeah. Vic McQueen. That is an amazing name. I just have to say, like, hell of a name. Way to go, Joe Hill.
I love that, obviously the McQueen reference and the bike and everything. I was like, okay, somebody's a Steve McQueen fan. Right. But yeah, it works. It works.
Yeah, that was just, that was great stuff. So I guess do you have anything else you want to touch on to kind of just like wrap up this episode? Because I mean, we've hit the major points. She's gone back and forth between the bridge several times. She's aware of the fact. She's like loosely aware of Manx. She kind of sees him through these visions. She understands that I guess maybe not understand, but she knows that whenever she goes to the spot of the bridge, she can go through it and she can get lost items. She doesn't necessarily know she has abilities, but she knows that something's going on per se. And the thing that's going on with her eye is, I guess, a result of her using her powers, I would assume, right?
That's right. Yep. Yeah.
So we have that whole thing going on. Every time she uses her abilities, Manx kind of gets a little ping on his map. Which did you like the map with all the Easter eggs on it with like Pennywise's circus? And that
was a nice little touch. And again, I think Joe Hill, in a sense, I've seen some of his other work. The first time I heard about Joe Hill is through Horns. And if anybody remembers that movie, that's like that was the Daniel Radcliffe who he's like, I swear to God, I'm not Harry Potter anymore. So he was just doing every movie he could to get away from Harry Potter. Yeah. And it's a really out there concept. But once again, when I was talking about that movie on my channel, I was talking about how reminiscent it is of some of the stuff that his dad does. Yeah. And I don't know if he's surrendered to that, because we had kind of talked about it in the book. You can definitely pick up on a king vibe, but he is doing his own thing, right? So it's I don't know. I just sound like I'm diminishing his writing, which I'm not. It's fantastic.
It's good. It is good writing. Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, this was one moment, especially when you saw Pennywise's circus on the map that Manx has, that I go, he's just kind of surrendering to it at this point. You know what I mean? Where he's just like, okay, we all know what I'm doing here. So but it was a nice touch. I kind of chuckled when I saw that.
Right. And then the other time we go back to Manx is when it's like full blown Zachary Quinto and the kid like smiles and he's got like the vampire teeth. And that was a little nice creepy imagery thrown in there. Like I said, I would have liked a little bit more of that. The one thing I would have wanted more from this episode was just a sense of uneasiness. Or a sense of unease. I didn't necessarily feel that for a good majority of this episode, and I'll go back to that opening again. They really dropped the ball on hooking you early on, but thankfully all the stuff with Vic and her family, like it sank its claws into me almost immediately. I will say there was something fascinating about her. She was very different from your usual protagonist, I guess you could say. She really and like I said, Ashley Cummings really made it her own. And then when going back to Zachary Quinto, when he was able to not deal with the makeup, he kind of slipped into that very slick he had a ghoulish internal sense to him, but then on the outside, he could smooth talk his way out of a lot of things. I got that vibe. So that was really good. And then, the ending when he's taking Danny off to Christmas Land. I am looking forward to seeing what Christmas Land looks like eventually. So, overall, I mean, it's a good first episode. This show seems like it's going to be fun summer television, which is exactly what you want. And it looks like it's going to boast some good performances as well. It's not going to win Emmys or anything, but there's a lot of intrigue that it's going to keep me wanting to watch week in and week out. So, I don't know. Do you have any final thoughts on it?
No, I think that's spot on. I think my reaction to it after watching the first one, I kind of went, okay. Yeah,
exactly.
You weren't blown away by anything, but I think a lot of that has to do with It wasn't necessarily what I thought it was going to be, but that doesn't mean it was bad. It was good in a lot of other respects. And like you said, the strength really comes, with the family, and that storyline's fantastic. But I wanted a little bit more horror and a little more unease, like you had said. Yeah. So that's what I expected. Didn't really get that, but you still get something that's intriguing, that's setting up the rules of this world, which, believe people who have read the book, there's a lot to it. This is like, once again, this is a Joe Hill universe, much like his dad did. So there's enough little, Easter eggs and things and hints that they drop where you go, okay, so we're going to have to figure out how this works and who this is and how, everything connects. So yeah, it does get you for sure that you at least want to watch the next one. So it definitely does its job. It was just not a job I thought it was going to do.
Yeah.
It's just a little different, right?
Yeah, for sure. And, part of that may just be the translation on screen, because Joe Hill was involved. And so maybe this is legitimately how he saw it. But then part of that is, I guess they don't want to commit to being too scary right off the bat, because then they have to live up to that the entire show. So I can understand them wanting to ease into the horror elements. So we'll just have to wait and see. Overall, I think it was a solid episode, like you. So that's it. That's gonna be that's it for our discussion for our first episode of our after show for NOS4A2. Mike, thanks for joining me as always. Where can everyone find you?
Well, you can find me at Real School, the best kept secret on YouTube. Got a few new reviews coming out. Still working away on some of my South by Southwest coverage, but these movies aren't even out for a while, and it's always a pleasure, my friend, to join you on Men vs. Movies. Anytime we can collaborate, it's great. So I'm looking forward to doing this every week. It'll be good.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. It's nice that it's a show that's fun in and of itself. So I'm really excited about that. But yeah, guys, let us know your thoughts and opinions on episode 1 of NOS4A2 down in the comments section below. Did you love it? Did you hate it? Just let's talk this show down there. Hopefully I'll get through the book before we finish this series, because I really want to lend some insight from the book to the episodes. But as always, guys, you can like Men vs. Movies on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and also be sure to subscribe to the channel for more movie reviews and movie-related content on a weekly basis. If you like me specifically and you like what I have to say, you can give me a follow on Twitter at Griff Schiller. All right, that's going to do it for episode 1 of our NOS4A2 After Show, and we'll catch you next week. Take care.